Hello, I'm Davina of sheepandstitch.com, and today I'm going to talk about what to do when you've added new stitches into your work. Alright, so how do you know if you've added new stitches? Alright, well, a dead giveaway is these little holes that appear in your work, and also if your fabric, the sides of your fabric are kind of slanting upwards, like this, and of course, the biggest giveaway is that you've got more stitches on your needle, than the number of stitches that you cast on. So that's how you know if you've been adding, stitches into your work. So before I talk about how to fix this, let's talk about how this actually happens. How did you get all these extra stitches onto your needle? Alright, so the first way, and the most common way that this happens, is you're just knitting along, happily knitting along, and then suddenly, for whatever reason, you decide you're going to bring your yarn, your working yarn, up front as if to purl. Maybe you just had a brain fart, maybe you were listening to something funny on NPR and you just kind of forgot, and then you knit into your next stitch just like that. Alright, so when you do this, you'll see that there is a new stitch that's been introduced right here. Right? This is the stitch that was made when I brought my yarn up front. So let's do that again, just in case you didn't catch that. And I don't know why this stitch is twisted, but I just untwisted it. Okay, so you're just knitting la-di-da, and then you bring your yarn, your working yarn, up front, and just keep an eye on this working yarn, okay? So it's up front, and then you knit into the next stitch, and just like this, you have created a new stitch. Right? Just like that. You've increased a stitch. And this bringing up, your yarn up front is actually a legitimate stitch. It's called a yarn over, and, you can do intentional yarn overs if you want, little holes like this, like if you're making lace, or like baby stuff, it can be really pretty, but in our case, we don't want these holes in our work. It looks weird, right? So that's one way that you can accidentally increase a stitch. Another way, a more insidious way, is by knitting between two stitches. So you can see that I've got one stitch here and the next stitch right here, and between these two stitches is like, a bit of a bridge, right? So sometimes some people will like knit into this, place between two stitches and just make a stitch just like that, right? So that's that's less common, but still very possible, and then you make that extra stitch and you just knit into the next stitch just like that, right? So those are two ways that you can accidentally introduce new stitches into your work. But by far the most common way is by making that yarn over, the accidental yarn over. And it's called a yarn over because you literally bring your yarn over your needle. Okay, so you bring your yarn over and you knit into the next stitch, and that's, how a new stitch appears into your work. So how do you fix this? Alright, so the best way to fix this, the best way is if you actually did a yarn over in your work, because it's the easiest one to spot. So how you fix this is when you're coming across the back of your work. So now we're knitting into the back of the row that we just knit, is when you're doing this, you come across your yarn over and you can actually see it on your needle, and it looks really kind of funky. It doesn't look like the rest of our stitches, right? It looks like this, funky imposter that's just hanging out on our needle. And what you can do when you spot it is just bump it off. Just take it off the needle. You're not welcomed, right? Just throw it off the needle and knit into your next stitch as if, nothing happened. Alright, that's the best way that you can get rid of, a new stitch. But that requires that you're quite vigilant, and that you keep your eyes open, keep your eyes peeled, and you notice that stitch. Otherwise, you'll just knit into it, and then you have, cemented that additional stitch into your work. So that's not so good. So here we go. Now we are at our, second increase stitch with the yarn over, and you can just see that it looks different from our other stitches, right? You can also see there's like a hole, right? So when you see this, just drop it off your needle, right? Get them out of there, and then continue on with your knitting. Now, when you, and here's another guy. Here's the other one. We're just going to drop them off. So with the, increased stitches, done by knitting between two stitches, there is no dead giveaway. So we've actually just knit that new stitch. We just knit across it. I have no idea where it is right now. It is somewhere in here. And that, knitting between two stitches is way harder to spot. And usually by the time you've spotted it, it's just too late. Okay, so hopefully you're not going to make that increase. If you do, the only recourse you have is just to rip off your stitches, to the point where you have the number of stitches that you cast on with. And that's the same with these little holes right down here, right? I've gone past the point where I'm knitting on the back side of it, where I can just drop that stitch off. These holes have kind of been cemented, and these were made with yarn overs. So in this case, I'm just going to have to rip back my work down to this first increased stitch, and then just knit back up. I can't really patch these guys up. If I try, it'll just look ugly. And it's a way better, use of my time and energy to just rip it back and start from here again and just be more vigilant. Okay, so the best way for you to, fix an increased stitch when you're making an accidental yarn over is just to, notice your knitting. And if you see a weird stitch that looks like, that's making a big hole, plop that off your needle, and then you will have gotten rid of that increased stitch. All right, so there you have it. One way for you to fix an additional stitch into your work. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then please like it and subscribe right here for more knitting and pattern tutorials. Okay, that's it for me. I'm Davina of sheepandstitch.com, and I'll catch you next time with another knitting video.